So starting off with the basic physical layout that has this front door that'll open just so you can see things without the glare, and point out a few pieces. This piece here is called the build plate, and the design will actually build from the bottom up on this plate, and this will rise up once we start the process. In the back here is the extruder. It reminds me personally a little bit of a hot glue gun setup. So you have the filament, which is the plastic composite that comes through the tubing, and it comes through this very hot metal tip, just like it would be on a hot glue gun. So there's no touching that once this is all warmed up. This is just a little bit of the filament left over from the last project that's dried, and you can see that it does have that kind of plasticky quality. Up in the back here is the reel of filament, and we're using in this printer the PLA type of filament, which is a really low fume sort of. It has very low odor, so that especially in a library space, you don't have to take into consideration the venting and just that kind of chemical smell that can come off of the other type of filament, which is more of an oil-based one. I think you get a different look in the end, but in this case, we do like the PLA because it's an organic matter, and some of them are cornstarch based, cassava root, and they're all biodegradable. So it's kind of a cool material to work with. Anyway, so that filament reel feeds into this tube in the back and comes up into the top of the extruder. That extruder is a detachable piece, and when you're changing the filament, say you want a different color material to print in, that piece will come off. We'll have a separate segment about how to change that, but just so you see, this is all set up and ready to go, and the physical layout. Those are the main pieces that you want to stay familiar with before you get started on this. It's also good practice to give everything a good wipe down before you start. There's a lot of precision built into these, so you do want to have kind of a good sense that everything is level and clean. So I'm just using these electronic wipes. Ready. All right. Now the next part is to choose a design, whether it's one that you make yourself or one that's pre-made by somebody else. In this website, this is all free, open source, Thingiverse.com. You get a huge selection of ideas to print. This has a featured collection with jack-o'-lanterns for Halloween. So we'll go there. The designer gives you some background on the file, and it's pretty straightforward though. You just click on the project that you want to print, or the item you want to print, download all files. I minimize here, and then go to downloads, open the files there. The file that we're looking for is the STL, so .stl files are the ones that are going to be the ones to send to the printer. This has a bunch of variations. I'm going to just pick the short pumpkin. And I open that up. When I double click on it, you see the MakerBot software bounces, and that pulls the software it just opens it up right into there. So we're pretty much right where we want to be. You can see the scale is right, and that it would actually fit inside the dimensions of the printer that we have. I've downloaded them before where they actually are too big, so you absolutely need to scale the size of it. But the other reason to scale is if you don't have time for this size project, this might take 4 hours to print. You want to keep that in mind too, in terms of the size of the object you're printing. So the scaling function is great because you can, just using the mouse pad, you select it, you can go to this window to scale it, and you can do a numerical scale, or you can do like a squeeze on the actual object. Let's see. So in this case, we're in millimeters, 25 millimeters, is about an inch. So say we want to just do 35 millimeters. We don't want to take too long. It shrinks it down to a teeny little pumpkin. Close that out, and that's all. That's okay to go there. You also can check in your settings here to make sure if you need any other options to consider. And the options to consider just generally for printing any project, the main points to remember are raft, support, and layer height. This defaults to a standard quality. You can also change that to a higher quality, but keep in mind the higher the quality, the longer it will take to print your object. Here the raft is just a base and it's automatically set. You can see it's grayed out, so it's not really a choice to undo it. I think that's fine. You have it, it's a base layer to go underneath your object, and it's not a high quality piece, and it will pop away from the finished product when it's all done. I'll show you, I can show you that this, for example, is the raft of the pumpkin that I started and ran out of time to print, so you can see the cross section of it. But when this is done printing, it actually just pops cleanly away from it. So that's what the raft is. And then the support is another function that you'll be interested in. If you have any piece of the project that doesn't have, keep in mind, this is important for thinking it through, that it's printing from the bottom up. So if you imagine a person, it's printing, so say we're printing me, you'd be fine coming all the way up to my knees and getting to my thighs, but once you get to my fingertips, they're not attached to the arms because the arms haven't been printed yet. So you have to build supports in. It's like a scaffold, and it's a temporary structure that's not part of the final design, but it's printed into the design to support anything that might just be otherwise floating in midair. So it makes it possible to build from one direction, the bottom up. In this case, we have, we don't necessarily need a support first, but we can double check. It's kind of like you're on the safe side to print with a support. It just might not be necessary. So we did a solid object earlier, we didn't need a support, but in one of these jack-o'-lanterns, you can look on this little piece here, I don't know if you can see it, but there's this little tooth that's part of the jack-o'-lantern, and we had to pull away the support from that, but that was something that needed a support also. So little features like that that you might not think about ahead of time, you will actually need a support for them. In this case, I think it's a solid pumpkin. We don't need a support. We'll be okay. All right, and there's that. Once you've got your scale, your support, your raft, oh, sorry, let's go back to settings. Just one other thing I wanted to point out, and this kind of ties into the quality, but the layer height, we have a default setting there of 0.2 millimeters. And I'm going with it. We've printed a few projects, and they come out fine. The quality looks great, but I think the smaller the layer height, the higher the quality. So you lose kind of some of the appearance of the lines in the final design. Like here, you can almost see the really thin layers that are being built up, and I think the thinner your layer, the more solid the object will look. But like I say, in this case, this has been we've had great results with this layer height, and we're gonna stick with that one. Next thing to do is to just go to the print option. And this is where it gets very mechanical, and it also takes a little while to warm up. Just like an oven needs to preheat, this whole contraption needs to be brought to temperature. The default setting on the temperature for the extruder point is 215 degrees Celsius. And again, those settings can vary, and I think from library to library or place to place, you might find that's where things can get a little persnickety, just depending on the temperature of the building and the temperature of the pen. You might have some variability of results. So I think that's a place where people have some troubleshooting. We've had so far, just, the luck has been fine with the temperature at 215, which is what it was set to. We already went through that, sorry. I'll have to edit some of that out. All right. Shut off. Okay, go off. All right, now here, hopefully we can get this clearly because we are filming through the door, but I just wanted to quickly show that plate does rise up to the level of the pen. So when the whole process begins, this will all be set with the new, like the information of the file that we pulled from Thingiverse. It's going to set, it's called homing, so it's basically calibrating the plate with the new information for this particular project. And it's setting an X, a Y, and a Z coordinate or axis, and putting the coordinates in for each of the movements to make this particular object. It's kind of amazing, really, when you think about it. So this homing process can take a little while. It's all part of the warming up phase. And the printing process itself can take, like I said before, several hours. There's a lot of information being transferred. So to think that you can print something in 3 dimensions in a couple of hours, ultimately, it's kind of incredible.